audio is important from the end user's perspective, because it basically is conferences and meetings that we deal with. So all the end user cares about is whether they've got intelligible, reinforced speech, and if they get that, then nothing's said about it. We don't get congratulated at the end of the day for actually producing, intelligible speech. It's only when it doesn't happen that the end user is concerned. And one of the issues we often have at the Royal Society of Medicine is with our delegates in, say, Q&A sessions, where they're making a contribution to a panel discussion. And we have rows of seats that are up to, say, 20 seats in a row. So by the time that the handheld radio mic has made its way to them, they've already asked half a question. And that becomes an issue from the fact that those that perhaps are watching via video conference or a live stream have not heard what the question is. And if it's not repeated, it's lost forever. So obviously we can, if it's a video recording, we can correct that in the edit. But for somebody who's watching live online, the whole meeting has started to become less understandable. Using the hard of hearing loop system or induction loop, they also have missed out on hearing what the question was. So it's been a challenge for us to try and create an audio system where we found a solution to that problem. And I'm not saying we've found a solution to that problem. It's just that we've gone around so many venues looking at different methods of getting audio from delegates in the seats in the lecture theatre. Even to the House of Lords to look at the motorised hanging microphones there. Slightly put off by the fact that apparently they change the technician every 30 minutes due to the sheer pressure of controlling that system. It might have changed since I was there. I mean, one integrator described what we were looking for as magic audio. It just doesn't exist. There's always going to be some kind of issue. And even when you're specifying it for an installation, obviously, until the installation is complete and you can actually be in that space listening to the audio, you will not know that specification is correct. It's absolutely crucial to everything we do. I mean, it's been said that obviously a video conference could continue as long as you had audio. If you lost video, it's still intelligible. A live stream, if there's the slides and audio, is still as useful as seeing the presenter as well. So it's one of those factors of AV that's perhaps not given the amount of focus it should be given, but the focus is only there when it goes wrong.
What was interesting today was, with the mixture of people we had at today's event, is there is a gulf in how these things are looked at. So we had a consultant who has a very sort of defined way of how he goes about looking at the requirements and managing the client's expectations. And then you have the end users who are looking at a bigger picture, beyond, not just beyond audio and beyond AV, but a whole host of other issues as well. And audio then just becomes one of those things. So what's come out from today's roundtable is the fact that there's a huge gulf of understanding in how one goes about specifying audio. There are consultants who have a very defined way that they wish to go about doing things, and then there's end users who have to think about issues not just to do with audio but AV and many other issues beyond. But I think in general there was consensus, the fact that there and a bit of an admission that there often isn't enough care about how the audio is specified, and the fact that maybe people with education, which was something we talked about a lot today, could be informed to put a lot more time and effort into having more precise definitions of not just the technical requirements of the audio for their next project, but also their aspirations and expectations of the audio and what they really want.
How do you think audio is specified by your customers, and do they know enough about it?
Well, audio is specified in a variety of ways, and there is a vast mix of knowledge out in the industry. I think it's ever improving. And thanks to Infocom and to the CTS accreditations, things are improving. But there's a broad scope further that we need to go to develop audio specifically. So from a specification perspective, there are consultants, and they do a fantastic job. There's a broad amount of information available and a knowledge base available through integrators. But as a distributor, we're really working hard to convey more knowledge and information deliberately to improve the way the technology develops and what you can do in real applications.
Is audio seen too much as a specialist technology within the AV mix, when it should actually be seen as just another technology that achieves an effect that the AV buyer wants to hang his coat on, if you like?
Yes, there is definitely a black magic to some views of audio. It's not that complicated, and there are a number of training courses that can really help to sort of move past that. And they're available for end users or integrators, and from a manufacturer's perspective and a distributor's perspective, that's what we deliver to the market. So it's about information and passing it on and learning more.
What do you think about the AV Roundtable? Was it useful for you?
It was a hugely useful event, I have to say, and it's very interesting to get feedback from so many different perspectives across the process, and from the AV manager, through the integrator, the consultant, and from the manufacturer. So I think it's a really broad mechanism for being able to sort of learn more, and I found it very interesting.
Yes, I do think that to some extent audio is isolated within the AV mix very often. People look at perhaps some of the more high-ticket items within the specification of an audiovisual system and focus a little bit more on what's got the wow impact, and to an extent negate the holistic experience of an audiovisual system. Very often by spending a little bit more time and effort in understanding the use case and what the client's trying to get out of their system, very often for not a lot extra investment on their part, they can achieve a much better result from the whole system.
Do they need to be educated better, or do they just need to be aware of what audio can achieve within the mix itself?
I think education is perhaps a little bit of a strong word in there, but yes, I do think that there is a job within the audio industry at large for us to raise the profile of audio within AV. Very often it perhaps does play second fiddle to the V in AV, but certainly as we discussed today, it is an absolute vital component to communication. We cannot just simply communicate visually. We cannot simply communicate with audio. So it's necessary to look at bringing those disciplines together in the best function of both of those disciplines, also considering the overall integration of them and the user experience from having to operate it.
What were the highlights today of the roundtable? What stood out for you?
I think from my point, coming from the vendor camp, it was very interesting to get the viewpoint, right, from consultant via contractor to the end user, and see how each grouping has a very slightly different way in how they approach their considerations of an audio system. Obviously the consultant is looking to deliver perhaps not quite what the client's asked for, but what the client really needs. So they've got a real job there in understanding the client brief and translating that into real function. I think the integrators sometimes can get caught in the middle between what the client wants and what the client's prepared to pay for, and yet on the other hand what the consultant is specifying. But I think my one takeaway was there is a lot of education to do, probably mostly at the end user side of the equation, just to help them understand how audio can deliver within their use cases to improve their overall experience. I mean, as I said earlier, very often I'm talking to people, particularly looking at the video conferencing aspect of audio, and there's an acceptance that it's good enough, because very often I think people don't understand it can be a lot better than good enough for pretty much the same cost. So I think, you know, that there's definitely an education that we can do there.
There are a number of issues that were raised, really. One is in specification for audio. Is it something really you have to get very detailed about, or is it something the consultant can really advise you on? You have to look upon the space you're really planning for. What are the expectations for that space? What do you have to consider technically, but also what's the overall effect of that space going to be? You also need to consider legislation. I mean, how does the equipment you're choosing conform to the legislation that's current? You can be led down a bit of a garden path by focusing too much on legislation that really won't affect you practically. There are also a number of other things you can think of, but ultimately you need to be focused on the overall picture where audio sits in what you're choosing for your AV installation.